Welcome to Lesson 6 in this introductory ancient Greek course. In this lesson, we're going to look at the aorist tense and compound verbs. First, the aorist tense. The word aorist is a term you're unlikely to have come across before. The word aorist actually means limitless, but it probably makes most sense to think of it as the simplest of the past tenses. So verbs in English such as jumped, swam, ate, said, these would all be examples of the aorist in Greek. And so it's to be seen as a simple past tense and different then from the imperfect, which we translated as was doing something or they were doing something. Different again from the perfect tense, which we translate with the verb have. I have done something or has done something. And different also from the pluperfect, where the word had is used in English. So in short, the aorist tense is a simple past tense. If you're familiar with the preterite tense in Spanish, then it corresponds to that. It is, not surprisingly, very commonly found, and it's probably the most commonly found tense in both ancient Greek and in New Testament Greek. So, how is it constructed? Because it is a past tense, just like in the imperfect, every form of the aorist begins with an augment. The augment, if you'll remember from an earlier lesson, means the addition of an epsilon before the stem. If the stem begins with a consonant, this is a very straightforward addition. If the stem begins with a vowel, then sometimes the augment can create an interesting spelling. After the stem, first of all, in most verbs, not absolutely everyone, but in most of them, the letter sigma is added. We saw this in the future tense as well. In the future tense, the only marker that you have a future is that sigma between the stem and the ending. Well, in the aorist, the sigma is one of the markers of the aorist tense, and it's usually positioned here just after the stem. After that sigma, you get a set of endings. These are new endings which you haven't seen before, though you'll see a certain pattern to them as we go through the model. So the ending for the first person is alpha. So epausa means I stopped. And it's the addition of alpha that tells you that it's I. For the second person, it's alpha sigma. We've seen a sigma before in the second person. So epausas means you stopped. For the third person of the verb, the ending is epsilon unless the next word begins with a vowel or unless this is the last word in a sentence, in which case the letter nu is added. So either epause or epausen is the Greek for he or she or it stopped. This is the only one of the 6 forms which doesn't use an alpha in its ending. Now for the first person plural, epausamen. The alpha is typical of the aorist tense, and the men ending is a men ending we've seen before. So that means we stopped. Then we have the you plural form, and that's epausater, which means you plural stopped. Finally, for they stopped, the ending will be an, making the word epausan. Now, for other verbs like pao, whose stem begins with a consonant and ends with a vowel, this is the formation that you can find applied in the aorist. For other verbs, you're going to find some slight variations on this, particularly if the stem ends in a consonant that will blend with the sigma. And we're going to have a look at some of these examples just now. Now, you've seen most of these verbs before. What we're going to do is we're going to make each of them aorist. So pempo, which means I send, we need now to make into I sent. So we begin with the augment, and that's an epsilon added to the stem pemp. After pemp, we expect to add a sigma for the aorist before adding the alpha ending for I sent. But here is a problem. Pi and sigma should be written as a single letter in Greek. They should be written as a psi. And so the Greek way of spelling I sent is pempsa with a psi in the middle instead of pi sigma. By a similar reasoning, grapho, which means I write, will turn to egrapsa for I wrote, because a phi and a sigma also combine to make a psi. A phi is close enough a sound to a pi to function in the same way. Now the next one, lego, means I say, and for here we have to recall that gamma plus a sigma also makes a combined letter. It makes the sound x, and so I spoke or I said will be Alexa. There is in fact an alternative word which also means I spoke or said, but Alexa is correct as well. Peitho, which means I persuade, has a stem ending in a theta. Theta plus sigma will be a very awkward combination to say. It's almost impossible to say it without spitting. So the Greek response to that is to remove the theta completely before the sigma. I persuaded is peisa. For akuo, your problem isn't with the end of the stem, but it's with the beginning. The stem begins with an alpha, and when you add your augment epsilon to an alpha, you get a combination of vowels. Greek sometimes behaves inconsistently with how it merges the vowels, but an epsilon and an alpha together normally give you the letter eta. Ku, and sigma, alpha, akusat means I heard. The next two are new verbs which we haven't introduced in this course, but baptizdo would be I baptize. I baptized is bapti sa with a sigma, basically replacing the zeta here for the same reason we saw with peitho. It would be very difficult to say baptized sa and have both those letters. Thaumazo means I am amazed at or I admire. I admired behaves exactly the same way as baptisto. Ethaumasa. Well, now it's time to put these into practice with some sentences. The first two, some homemade sentences in classical Greek. The third, a quotation from the Gospel of Mark. And the third one includes some rarer vocabulary to you, and you might either wish to use a dictionary or a little guesswork. Pause the video now and do what you can with these. Going over them now, I'm first of all going to identify the verbs. So the verb in the aorist tense in the first one is ekelusse. And if we take it to pieces, we can recognise its augment. So if we're looking it up in a dictionary, we ignore that augment and we look it up under kappa. We cut off the ending, and we also cut off the sigma because we expect to see the sigma between the stem and the ending in in Greek. Now, the reason I'm cutting it up for you is showing you the work you need to do when you're looking up words you meet for the first time in the aorist tense in a dictionary. It can be confusing when you first see them with an augment. If you reach for the dictionary and start looking under epsilon, you're not going to find the word. So you have to cut the augment off as well as cut the ending off. And if you can't remember this one, the dictionary entry is Kelu, that's a stem, O, that's the first person ending, and it means I order. So this whole first sentence is the teacher ordered. I'm translating the aorist nice and simply there. The slave, luain, to release, or to untie, an infinitive there. The horses. Well done if you got that right. Now for the second one, the verb which I've put in the aorist tense is erkusan, and I've picked akuo, which we saw earlier in the video. And that means I heard. So the whole translation here should be the Athenians heard the general's words in the assembly. And now for the piece of Mark. Well, here's some words that you've not met before, but the verbs which I included are verbs which we've seen earlier in the video. Ebaptisa and baptise. Both these verbs are part of the same Greek verb, which is baptisto, which means I baptize. They appear here in different tenses. You see the augment there in the first one tells you the first one is an example of an aorist. But in the second one there is no augment. You've got a sigma again, but you've got an ending which is the ending that you might find in either the present or the future tense. That sigma marks it out of the future. So this is a future tense verb, whereas this one is aorist. We begin with ego, a word which is possibly guessable, meaning I. And this is the first person of the verb, and it's aorist, so I baptized. The word humas, which appears twice in this sentence, may be familiar to you if you know the text. It means you, a pronoun in the plural, meaning you plural. Hudati, in water. This is John speaking, John the Baptist. Autuster, but he. Here's our future tense, will baptize you in, that much you know. Pneumati hagio is in the Holy Spirit. Hagios, if we consider words like hagiography, is an adjective meaning holy. And pneuma, if we consider words like pneumatic and pneumonia, with connections with air or wind, pneuma means spirit or breath. Well done if you got those sentences right. Now, the form of the aorist which we've met so far had a full name, the weak aorist. And that's to distinguish it from what we're going to meet now, which is the strong aorist. There are in Greek two formations of this very important tense, weak and strong. And if you consider the English language too, the English language has got two different ways of forming our most commonly used past tense. The first is to add the suffix ed to a verb, and this works for many verbs, such as walk or work. I walked, I worked, I munched, and so on. But there is a second formation which doesn't involve a suffix at all. It tends to involve a vowel change. So, for example, I sing, I sang. I fall, I fell. I run, I ran. And if you consider English with its two different formations of the past, then perhaps it's easier to appreciate how it is that Greek verbs too have got two alternative aorists. Some verbs will have one way of forming the aorist, the weak way. Others will have the strong way. And there's one verb which in fact has a weak aorist and a strong aorist. Let's now have a look at the strong aorist, and here are some examples of verbs which each form their aorist with a strong formation. Ballo means I throw. Lepo means I leave. That's in the sense of I leave behind, relinquish. Lambano, I take, as in capture. Manthano, I learn. Pipto, I fall. Trecho, I run. Ago, I lead. And heurisco, I find. Some of these are words you've met already on this course, others are new. What they have in common is they all form their aorist with what we call the strong formation. So how does that work? Well, first of all, we always have an augment. And again, if the stem begins with a consonant, that augment is easily recognisable. It is an epsilon. If the stem begins with a vowel, then that epsilon augment is going to combine with the initial vowel of the word and you'll get a different spelling. We've got a couple of examples of those at the end of this list to look forward to. What follows the augment is the stem, but the thing about the strong aorist is it changes its stem in the aorist tense. We talk of verbs having a present stem and a strong aorist stem. So unlike the weak aorist, I can't repeat the present stem before adding an ending. I have to add a new stem. And this new stem is quite often a shortened version of the present stem. So for the verb ballo, whereas the present stem is bal with beta, alpha and two lambdas, the strong aorist stem is beta, alpha and just one lambda. To that ending, to that stem, I'm going to add the ending on, which is an ending you've seen before. Let's look at the next one. Again, I start with an augment. Making the stem, I need to reduce lape to lip. Again, I've got rid of a letter. There's no particular logic to follow. You can't work out which letter gets left. But what we tend to see is that the strong aorist stem is simply shorter and simpler than the stem of the present of the same verb. So after the augment and the strong aorist stem lip, I'm then going to once again add on to make I left. Now let's do the same with lambano. Here is our augment and our stem. This time it's lab. So I've simplified the stem significantly, and then I'm going to add on, elabon, I took. And math is the strong aorist stem of manthano, on, I learnt. What these four aorist stems all have in common then is that they are shortened versions, down to one syllable, 3 letters, of the present stem. You can often see a similarity with the present stem, which will help you when you're using a dictionary to work them out. But for some verbs, the strong aorist stem is very different to the present stem. Now for these, it's really important that when you're learning them, you learn the strong aorist together with the present, because otherwise there's no way that you could guess them by simply looking at them. For example, pipto means I fall, but pes on means I fell. And here, the strong aorist stem pes really bears no relation to the present stem, pipped, apart from, I suppose, the fact that they begin with the same letter. And what about the next one? I ran is epsilon. Now here's your strong arrow stem, dram. It doesn't even begin with the same letter as the stem of trecho. And then the ending on. The strong arrow stem is very different. For our last two, we've got a stem which begins with a vowel. Now, ago means I lead, but I led is air. That might not surprise you, because we know the epsilon combines with the alpha to make an eta. Here is our aorist stem, gag, and to that we're going to add on. So ergagon is I led. And as for heurisco, the Greek for I found is heron. Heron. And now let's consider the endings that are added to this strong aorist stem. As you've seen, the first person ending is on. Perhaps you remember seeing that ending before in the first person. Let's give you the rest of the endings. The table goes like this. On, es, with new if the next word begins with a vowel or it's the end of the sentence. Omen, ete, on. Do these endings look familiar? They should do, because these are exactly the same as the endings for the imperfect tense. The strong aorist tense is a bit of a magpie when it comes to endings. It borrows the endings from another tense. You can tell that it's not the imperfect because they've been added not to the present stem, as the imperfect endings are, but to the strong aorist stem. So our formula for creating the strong aorist is augment, followed by the strong aorist stem, which is different to the present stem, followed by the imperfect endings. Now it's time to translate some sentences. In the first of these sentences, there are 3 examples of an aorist tense verb, and in the second there's only 1. In both you'll find scope for some ambiguities in your translation. Pause the video and see how you get on. Now I'm going to go over them. In the first one, your first aorist is edioxamen. That's a weak aorist. You can tell from the alpha in the ending. In the weak aorist, 5 of the 6 forms of the verb have got an alpha in their ending. Our next aorist verb is edramon, which is a strong aorist, and then we also have epesson, another strong aorist. Okay, here's a translation. We chased, you could say we pursued, the slaves, and. Now, edramon, the on ending, could be the first person of the verb, or it could be the third person plural. It could be I ran or they ran. But here I suggest the sense of the sentence might lead us to put they, because we chased the slaves and they ran seems logical to me. And continuing with that, and they fell into the river. In the next sentence, there's just the one verb, and that's heron, which is a strong aorist. And here you can just as easily say I found or they found. There's nothing in the context to suggest that one is better than the other. So they or I found the messenger in the assembly. Now, realistically speaking, you're very unlikely to be translating a single sentence out of context where it genuinely is ambiguous to you, whether it's going to be I or they. There's usually more words around it. There's a context which you can fit it in. It's very unusual that you're going to be left guessing. Well done if you got those sentences right. Now we're going to meet something completely new. Compound verbs are quite common in Greek. They're verbs which are made up of two elements, both standalone words in their own right. The two elements are, first, a preposition, and we'll have a look at these ones in a moment. The other is a verb. And when you stick a preposition and a verb together, you get a compound verb whose meaning is derived from both of them together. So pros, the first preposition on the list here, means to or towards. Bino means I go, and if we put these together, we get pros bino, which means I go towards. Used in context, we'd probably have another pros as well. So I could make a short sentence here, which will translate as I go towards the village. If we translate every element of this sentence, what we get is I go towards the village. But naturally in English we'd never want to say towards twice at that point, so we'll just translate that as I go towards the village. Apo by itself means away or away from. Put together with ballo, I throw, and we get the Greek I throw away. Or he throws away. Pipto means I fall. Ace means into. We fall into will be ace and pipto, but here we need to be careful. I can't write that sigma before another word because this sigma is only used for the end of a word. I'll need to write it with the alternative form, getting rid of that sigma and replacing it with this one. And ace pipto now means I fall into, or to change the ending, ace piptomen means we fall into. Ek means out or out of. Trecho, I run. What would ek treches be? I hope you can work that out. That is you run out of. Ago means I lead. Dia, which has a couple of meanings, has one meaning through. So if I say diago, and I'm not going to have two alphas in the middle, a single alpha will do. Diago means I lead through. Now for each of these you repeat the preposition if you're using them. So let's take that last one. I lead the slave through the marketplace. We can use multiple combinations to make compound verbs. I could, for example, have ek pipto, I fall out, or pros ago, I lead towards. Compound verbs are really quite common in Greek, and it's possible to see multiple varieties of them. When using one of these compound verbs in a past tense, it's important to know that the augment should go in between the preposition part of the compound and the verb stem part of the compound. Now let's take an example of ace pipto, I fall in. If you remember, the slave fell into the river. So ace pipto is our verb. The aorist stem of pipto is pes, and onto that the various endings are added. Ace remains our preposition part of the compound, but our augment must fill this gap here between the preposition and the stem. So ace pes is what I add the ending on. Now if I wanted to say the slave fell in, I need the third person singular. Hodoulos, ace pes. The next word will have to be ace again, and because we got two vowels together, I'm going to add the new, which we always add to a third person singular before a vowel. Hodoulos ace pesen, ace, well the river is ton potamon. What if we want to say we ran towards the gate? Well, the verb we need to use is pros treco, which means I run towards. It's a compound of pros and treco. The augment will go between the two. When I want to make the word we ran towards, I will start with pros, using the sigma, which we use for the beginning or the middle of words, because I haven't finished the word yet. Now, treco is a verb with a strong aorist. Its stem is, curiously enough, dram, and onto that stem endings are added. I insert the augment, epsilon, in between the preposition and the ending, so I get procedram. I want to say we ran towards, so the ending I'll add is omen. To complete that sentence, I repeat the word towards, pros, this time using a final sigma, and the word for gate in the accusative, which is ten, pulen. A couple of slightly more complicated examples now. Supposing I wanted to say, I threw away the books. Well, throw away is aparbalo. And we'll start with our apar. We'll leave some space for the augment, and we'll put in the strong aorist stem of ballo, which is just bal. Now I'm going to add the augment, an epsilon in the middle, and to that we'll add the ending. But the problem here is, in doing this, I've now stuck two vowels together, which Greek doesn't like. So what I have to do is I get rid of the omicron at the end of apar, and I write instead apebal, and to that I add the ending on, for I threw away the books. By the same token, he led the slave through the house will be diegage, for he led. We don't keep the alpha at the end of dia. It disappears before the egege of led. One other oddity concerns the use of the preposition ek. Ek, which means out of, has also got a form x. Before a vowel, x is preferred to ek. So if I want to say he ran away, using the verb ek trecho, well, I'll start with ek, I'll leave a space for the augment, and then I'll put the aorist stem, which in the case of trecho is dram, before adding the third person singular ending, epsilon. When I stick in my augment here, epsilon, I can see that I've got kappa before an epsilon, and Greek will prefer to say x before a vowel, and so we write exedrame, for he ran away. There's a logic to every one of these exceptions in these forms, but familiarity with them takes a little bit of time. So do give yourself time as you're learning to come to grips with this. Sometimes it can take quite a while to work out which word to look up in a dictionary when you're faced with a compound verb in the aorist tense. We finish with some examples for practice. Here's an opportunity for you to pause the video and have a go at translating these. And now I'm going to go over them. The first one is in the present tense. We go towards. Remember, I only write the word towards once. The marketplace. The second one is the slaves. And the verb is ran away. Well done if you got that. It comes from apo, trecho. They ran away from the danger. The third one is the sailors. The sailors fell into the sea. Finally, the god threw the men out of the land. Congratulations if you got those. Well done, and that concludes this lesson.